I'd like to share at this point a reading from Albert Schweitzer for our Chalice Lighting this morning. And I think it provides a symbol for the times in which we live and what we have gone through, because we have been a light to each other. He wrote, "At times our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who lighted the flame within us." And this candle that has just been lit symbolizes something in each of us and something that belongs to the collective of all of us, that we are lights to one another. Emily, thank you for that beautiful story. And thank you for reminding us all of the ambiguity of the holiday that we are currently entering, that for many people who are now a part of this society, that marks another date in the long calendar of oppression. I have endeavored to share with you a little bit about my background as I've talked from time to time, so you would come to know, at least to a small extent, who I am. But I'd like to tell you something that's very important for my essence, and that is my mission in life, vocationally, is to ensure that UU congregations in this country, wherever I can affect them, are stronger, more robust, more resilient, that they can withstand the pressures of society, that they can burn brightly as a beacon of light to people all over this country. I believe that our UU movement should be much larger than it is. I believe that we see right now conventional religion deteriorating almost by the day, becoming less and less, becoming grayer and grayer, and losing contact with people who are marginalized and people who are younger. And it is my hope that the UU movement can fill that void, because I believe the UU movement is incredibly fit and designed to meet the needs of the time, both socially and politically and theoretically, philosophically. And it's just a matter of us being the type of community that attracts people. Now, I hope you don't mind me drinking water from time to time. Is that okay? All right. I appreciate that. So, over the years, I developed, especially in midlife, a vocation where I sought to follow one of my mentors, Rabbi Edwin Friedman, and combine the teachings of Murray Bowen with my work as a religious professional. And it's worked for me well, and I've converted that into being an interim minister. And along that process, I was keenly interested in answering the question, what makes a UU congregation, or any congregation for that matter, what makes it healthy? What gives it well-being? You know, if you or I go to the doctor, I'll give a recent example from my own experience where I went to the doctor and I had a annual physical. And at the end of that, I was given a printout, and it was 3 pages long, and it was all these chemicals that they were checking. They drew blood, and I thought, my God, surely they drew a gallon of blood to get all these test results. But I must say, I was a little offended when I realized that my physical well-being was going to be judged on the merits of these chemical components. But that is the reality of the physical body. And over time, borrowing heavily from others, I realized that a congregation, any congregation, but most particularly a UU congregation that I was familiar with, was healthy to the extent that it practiced or it manifested certain characteristics. And I also noted that people were uncomfortable with being judged, but it's really not judgment, but being measured by indicators which could reveal whether or not the congregation was living up to its highest ideals. Because every congregation, this congregation and every congregation in America wants to be great, wants to do something wonderful, wants to help people. Well, how do you do that? And over a period of several years, borrowing heavily from others, I think I have a very clear idea of what it is. And just like I was somehow put off by the reduction of my physical well-being to that list of 3 pages of chemical analysis, just so we might be taken aback or slightly comforted, but it reveals things to us, just in the case of my physical health, that are restorative, that give help. The first thing is, the first characteristic is something I've already talked a great deal about, which is a covenant. Every healthy congregation I know of practices and is serious about a covenant. Not serious in a negative way, but serious in the sense that it is important to them. In every healthy congregation I have worked with, everybody in the congregation knows about the covenant. In fact, you might walk into their worship spaces and see it up on the wall, printed large enough so people can be reminded this is what we're here about. A covenant comes not from an imposition from above, but from the base up. This is how we choose to be with one another. And it isn't a burden. It is a form of liberation because it allows us to know how we can bring health and healing and well-being to one another by how we behave. So it is my hope, I spoke about this over the last year, it is my hope that the Committee on Ministry will follow through with this. Another thing that is true of every robust, flourishing UU congregation is small group ministry and the cultivation of small groups of any kind, because the real heart and soul of a congregation is where people are meeting face to face with other people in a group small enough to develop a real relationship of trust and confidence in one another. It doesn't come from a worship service or hearing a sermon. All those things might be temporarily of great import, but the real heart and soul and guts of a community arise from our deepest and most continuous relationships with one another. And that's one reason this is a great congregation, is that there's so many long-standing relationships. I was out in front of the congregation this morning. Someone came and met another person there and told me, you know, I've known this person for 40 years. And I thought, wow, what a blessing to have that depth of connection with somebody else. So that's very important. The third thing that is true of congregations that are healthy is they have policies that empower people to do what they care about most deeply, and that makes very clear how decisions are made. Because otherwise, if you don't have that, people get involved in interminable arguments about who has the authority to make what decision. And all of the life energy of a congregation is absorbed in people doing their own version of what they think is true and real and right, and not doing what is a commonly agreed upon thing. And so that is why I am delighted that there will be soon, I think, formally, I think, a task force team that will work on this most important subject. Another thing that is characteristic of very vivacious and living and vibrant congregations is that they have a robust and sustained method of recruiting, training, educating, and encouraging leaders. Now, this one's a little tricky because in a given congregation, only 2% of the people in a congregation at any given point in time will be interested in leadership. But that 2% is vitally important to the well-being of the congregation. And one of the things that has horrified me over the years is what we do to our leaders. When I went to Austin, Texas, don't quote me to anybody from Austin, but when I went to Austin, Texas, I came there, and one of the first things I did is, where's the previous board president? They said, well, we're not sure where he is. And I said, what do you mean? They said, well, he's vanished. I said, well, give me his address. I'll track him down. They gave me the address. It was a P.O. box. He had gone into deep seclusion. And that was 2 years after he had stopped being president. That's a symbol of what we sometimes do to our leaders. We burn them out because we don't give them a system where there's a clear sense of policies about what they should and shouldn't do. We bring them into their roles unprepared, and we don't support them when they're there. So cultivation of leadership is very important. The other thing that is important for congregations that are alive and vital and robust is that there is a culture of gratitude for every single person who does anything in that congregation. If you're the leader of a worship committee, if you're the leader of a personnel committee, if you're on the board, there is an opportunity where you are publicly thanked and praised by the congregation. And that you're not being paid as a volunteer, but you are most certainly given appreciation and gratitude. Because let's face it, folks, the lay leaders are the people who run the organization from year to year. I don't want to negate the role of ministers, of course, but they do have a habit of coming and going. And it is the laity that leads and uplifts. Okay. The other thing that I notice about congregations that are healthy is they brag about themselves to anyone who will listen as often as they can. Let me explain what I mean. If they're doing something in the community that's helping some group of people, everybody hears about that from the pulpit. If they're helping a nonprofit organization in the community through giving a monthly donation to them or giving money to them or for whatever way, the CEO of that organization is in the pulpit one time during that month, and you just give them 2 minutes. Of course, they take 4, but you give them the 2 minutes, and they pour their heart out in appreciation for what you're doing because you want to circulate to everybody. We're doing something. We're not just sitting here and breathing the air. We're doing something to help the larger world, and we want you to know about it. And visitors and new members see that, and they say, wow, something's happening here. It makes them want to draw more closely. The next thing is hard to express, but is very important. And I don't know the right words for it, but I'll say it this way. Congregations that are robust and vital are helping people fulfill their sense of religious or spiritual vocation. Bear with me for a minute, because I'm not using the right words, but in any given congregation, there are 15 or 20% of the people there that have, maybe it's due to what's going on in their lives, maybe it's due to the banality of what they're doing at their work, for whatever reason, they have this void that is fulfilled by working at the fellowship or church to do something to serve other human beings. Because each of us, whether we are aware of it or not, has a deep yearning to be of service to others. It's a tremendous blessing to our life if we feel like we're helping another human being. And if this congregation or any congregation can facilitate a person having a sense of fulfillment, it might be visiting the sick. It might be participating regularly in the worship service, doing a reading. It might be leading a class. It could be doing Habitat for Humanity. It could be helping a marginalized group. It could be anything. But the extent to which this congregation sees itself as a place of, in a way, encouraging the ministry of people. Not just the minister is not the only minister. The minister is really a symbol of the organization, but helping people fulfill their sense of what they can do to contribute to the world in a way that they cannot do through any other organization in our society. Another important aspect of robust congregations is that it addresses the need of every group at every stage of life. Are babies valued as much as the elderly? Are people who are on the edge of looking into the abyss of eternity affirmed as much as teenagers? Is everyone seen as having a special set of needs? The needs of a teenager are very different from the needs of a middle-aged couple with children or an elderly couple. But both of them are very, very real needs, but they're radically different. And what often happens in congregations is a congregation will specialize in one age group. I served one congregation where they literally had this huge wall separating the fellowship hall, the sanctuary, the office, and the children. It was like the children go down there, you know. It was like a bifurcated world, and it was clear what they focused on. Do we have a group that is deeply and truly addressing the issue of white supremacy in our culture? The work of anti-racism? Do we take the needs of people, do we listen to people and hear what they care about most deeply and respond to it? That is the magic elixir of congregations that are thriving. All healthy congregations also have a clear direction. I remember I had a colleague down in Florida who said that he was always engaged in a big building project because he said, if I don't do something like this, Ed, they're just going to tear each other apart. So he always had some huge goal, you know, to do. But it's true. We come to life if we're oriented to the future in a way that we think what we do, the actions we will take, will have a positive implication in the future. Next to the last, I mentioned financial condition. I mentioned that last because money, if you talk about money directly, it's a bad thing. Money is a consequence. It is a symbol of the enthusiasm of people in the congregation. Money is a symbol for the level of commitment and joy a congregation has about a congregation. So, but it's really important to have your financial house in order or everything else will fall apart. And so, for example, this last year, we did a mini capital campaign. I know it was misnamed, but it helped deal with some issues that were at a backlog. And so I know Jenny and others are looking at the whole area of analyzing our finances with much more care, and that is very important and is true of every robust congregation. And finally, I share one last characteristic. And this one is true. This one too is hard to articulate. And I'm not sure I'm using the right words, but I'll give it a try. And that is everybody in robust congregations, everybody knows how that congregation is transforming lives. Now, the word transform might be for some of us a bit too dramatic. Here again, words fail me. I don't know the right word to use. But what I'm talking about is everybody in a congregation that is really alive and robust and thriving knows that that congregation is doing things to help and improve the lives of people. And they know specifically what it is. Because, as I mentioned earlier, they're reminding each other all the time. This is what we're doing to transform lives. Now, I personally, since I've been here, I have found the anti-racism work transformative. I've found the honesty of those conversations transforming. That's what I mean by it. But I've heard about some beloved conversations, I think it's called, and I've had several people who have told me this is transformative for me. And so that's what I mean. So, but in healthy congregations, everybody knows how that congregation is transforming people's lives. They might even have it written on the wall. And they certainly have people talking about it. I remember when I was in Oakland, California, they had a outreach to the inner city because they were in the inner city. And I remember a black man speaking at one of the services. And he had been through the criminal justice system and he had struggled with crime and alcohol, drug addiction, and he had been a drug dealer himself. And part of the programming of that congregation is that they had helped this person, and he spoke, did a testimonial. And there was not a dry eye in the building because this group of privileged middle class and upper middle class people got to see what they normally don't see and what they avert their eyes from and what our society systematically does to hide us from, which is the suffering of how our society is set up. And so this was like a revelation, but it was also a powerful example of someone whose life had been transformed. And everybody in that congregation could say, there we are. We're helping in some way to make life better. Well, I need your help. Because in my work as interim minister, what I'm doing, I never tell people I'm doing this, but what I'm doing is I'm trying to slowly get a congregation to align as much as possible, to the extent that's possible, with these paradigms of health. That's what I am doing. That's all I'm doing. And so, as you can imagine, well, let me say something. This will shock you. This will really shock you. Did you know that not everyone is comfortable with change? I know. I'd say you won't be able to eat lunch because of the shock of that, but it's true. So I am in the wonderful position of trying to help congregations be healthier, but also in the difficult position of doing what nobody wants to do. And so what I want to do and what I try to do really doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter. But the only thing that matters is if I can form partnerships and if people can help in what I am doing. So now I've told you what I'm trying to do. I've laid it all out on the table. So I look forward to working with you. I consider it a great privilege to work with you. I feel some deep kinship with North Carolina. I have many relatives on the Brock side of the family that lived here at one time. I had one of the earliest Brocks who came from America, from the old country, Isaac Brock, registered in a Quaker Meeting House somewhere in North Carolina. I'll look that up at one time. And so I had relatives that lived in Buncombe County, I think it is. A number of them, it seemed to like that area. So it's good to be here and to work with you. And I'm so delighted to have as my partner, Jenny, as board president, and the wonderful board she has. And I look forward to our work together. And now Donna, I believe, will introduce the share the plate part of our service. Our words of meditation are from Leslie Ahuva Fales. May we be mindful of our need to be at peace with our bodies and our minds and with those around us and with the earth as we enter into a moment of reflection and meditation. All that we have been separated, all that we have been separately, and all that we will become together is stretched out before and behind us like stars scattered across a canvas of sky. We stand at the edge, arms locked together like tandem skydivers, working up the courage to jump. Tell me, friends, what have we got to lose? Our fear of failure? Our mistrust of our own talents? What have we got to lose? A poverty of the spirit? The lie that we are alone? What wonders await us in the space between the first leap and the moment our feet, our wills, however we move our bodies across this precious earth, touch down softly on an unknown soil. What have we got to lose that we can't replace with some previously unimaginable joy? Blessed are you, Spirit of life, who has sustained us, enlivened us, and enabled us to reach this moment. Give us courage in our leaping and gratitude in our landing. And share with us in the joy of a long and fruitful ministry together. May it be so. I will read words that are anonymous, but come to us at this time as we extinguish our chalice and head to another phase of life. May the courage of the early morning's dawning and the strength of the great mountains and the peace we know at the evening's end and the love we feel between one another and active in life everywhere we turn be in our hearts as we go forth from this place. Amen.